Wow, has it been quite the show, folks. Get ready for one heck of a finale. Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Todd reporting from Washington. And yes, I'm at the helm for my last daily Meet the Press Now before I pass the Meet the Press baton to my friend and colleague, Kristen Welker. Look, I've got a busy hour ahead. We got some new developments tied to the sweeping election interference case in Georgia. We've got new reaction from a rising star in the Democratic Party on growing anxieties about President Biden's age and ability to serve. Oh, and we're tracking a monster storm in the Atlantic called Hurricane Lee as we wait for it to turn north. Hurry up and turn north, please, and avoid hitting any parts of the East Coast. But I want to begin today on my last daily show with the single biggest story in American politics, and that is the state of our politics. Look, there's nothing I revere more than our democracy and the history of this country. It's why I stumbled into doing this. I just devour political history, and I love our political system, all of its nooks and crannies. Because the beauty of politics at its best is it's anyone's game. Anybody can get into it. But it only works when everyone agrees to the rules. And that means accepting defeats at the ballot box and moving on to the next election. And that's sadly not a given in our politics these days. Take, for example, what is happening in the state of Wisconsin. It's the latest example of this disturbing trend of delegitimizing political defeats. Republicans in Wisconsin are discussing impeaching the newly seated liberal state Supreme Court Justice Janet Protasewicz even before she's heard her first case. They say it's because she hasn't recused herself in a redistricting case, and she received financial support from the Wisconsin Democratic Party during her campaign. It's worth noting that so did her opponent, and nearly every Wisconsin Supreme Court justice sitting on the bench right now has received financial support from the state party with which they were representing in their campaign. I know, this is Wisconsin. This is just how they roll. It ain't beanbag in Wisconsin. Democrats tried to recall Governor Walker. Political retribution isn't unheard of. But you should take a look at all the quotes from Republicans during the Walker recall and ask yourself if there's any principles left here. But this kind of effort to remove any elected official who won a race by 11 points before a term actually begins would be unheard of. And not accepting the election results is becoming a disturbing pattern. And as we know, Wisconsin is not happening in a vacuum. Far from it. Folks, things have gotten so toxic that I think we have forgotten what good politicking looks like. And why, frankly, we, when I say we, civilization, came up with the idea of politics in the first place. It was to resolve disputes without a sword, without violence. That's why we have politics. Good politicking is hard. It takes work. It's messy. It ain't perfect. But it certainly beats the alternative. And we are seeing the consequences of the alternative play out in multiple criminal cases tied to the January 6th insurrection and former President Trump's lies about the election. The breaking political story of today reminds us of the problem we face as we learn new information about the investigation into attempts to overturn the presidential results in Georgia. As a newly released Fulton County special grand jury report shows, they initially recommended charges for an additional 21 people in that massive racketeering case, including 3 U.S. senators. Joining me now for more on the Georgia developments is Garrett Haake, right here at the table with me. We've also got Vaughn Hillier on the road with the Trump campaign in Rapid City, South Dakota. That's where Donald Trump will be later tonight. But Garrett, let me start with you. First, let's explore why do we have this? And I know why we have this. Media organizations filed saying they went, but the judge didn't have to disclose this. But he did. Mm-hmm. This is surprising, no? Yeah, look, I think what we've seen in Georgia is erring on the side of transparency throughout this process, whether it's televising basically everything that can be televised in these various hearings, to trying to release a lot of the background paperwork. And that probably starts at the top. I mean, when you've got a Republican governor aligned with a Democratic DA saying, you know, we believe Georgia's elections were properly held, we're going to show our work. I mean, whether it took a filing to get this out or not, I think the public benefits from seeing under the hood here. Look, I think we could have a debate about grand jury secrecy. And one of the hallmarks of it is that sometimes you don't want to, you know, hey, somebody was going to be indicted, but we didn't have the goods to get a prosecution. That's why we have grand jury secrecy. Sure. You can't unring the bell on Lindsey Graham. However, does this at all reinforce the notion that maybe Fani Willis is acting with precaution here? She's not going to indict somebody she thinks she can't convict.
Her partisans will argue that, and I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect other lawyers will show that. I mean, will argue that. Look, when you go into this report, which doesn't have a lot of detail in it, it does have the vote breakdowns of all of these various charges. And for Graham and former Senators Loeffler and Perdue, you see a significant minority of the grand jurors voting against the idea of an indictment, with even a footnote in this report saying some of them felt like what those people were practicing was politics, not a crime.
Right.
If you're Willis and you look at that and say, this is not the hill I want to die on, we want to have sort of safer set of charges, that would certainly make sense.
I only point this out because to me, it was almost rebutting the criticism that Lindsey Graham is already leveling when I'm like, no.
Yeah.
If you had been indicted, I think your criticism would be legitimate. Yeah. Not being indicted, to me, delegitimizes his
look,
criticism.
it also points out how funky this Georgia system is here, where you have these two grand juries in the first place. Like, sort of like, why do this whole...
This is what I question. I do think it's unfair to Lindsey Graham and these two, and everybody who wasn't indicted. Well, now it's out there.
Now your name's out there. That at least
where do I go to get my reputation back? Is a famous line from somebody who was indicted and cleared of charges back in the 80s.
No, and I think that's a totally fair point. And I think Graham's response today, which we can play...
Let's do that.
Yeah, Graham's response today basically arguing, I'm doing my job here as a senator. Here's what he told reporters in South Carolina today.
This is troubling for the country. We can't criminalize senators doing their job when they have a constitutional requirement to fulfill. It would be irresponsible for me, in my opinion, as chairman of the committee, not to try to find out what happened. But we're opening up Pandora's box here. Fulton County is one of the most liberal jurisdictions in the country. I fear this will spread, that the next election, Democrats may be on the other side of this.
And just to close...
Is that a threat or an observation?
Well, somewhere in between, and he's been fairly consistent on that point, actually, going back. And I know because I pulled the tape today of the interview I did with him in November of 2020, right after he made this phone call to Brad Raffensperger, and he was making the same points then, basically saying, look, I needed to look under the hood here, I needed to see what happened, and it's worth pointing out, he didn't call a hearing on this, he voted to certify Joe Biden's election. So sort of Graham can kind of check the box that he says he did his due diligence and then he moved on. But yeah, look, this is the road we're going to go down now. I mean, I do think whether it's a threat or something else, it's certainly an astute prediction.
What did your legal experts say that we learned about Fani Willis's case based on what she didn't do here?
Well, look, they certainly looked broader at the fake electors plot here. There was a number of other fake electors who were named in this who weren't charged. And I think they also looked closer at the folks who were closer to Donald Trump, whether it's Michael Flynn, who was named in this and not indicted, and Boris Epshteyn, who's, again, still a member of Trump's legal inner circle, who wasn't charged despite a pretty overwhelming vote by this first grand jury.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out if he is at all a part of this federal case or not.
He and Mark Meadows are the two people who folks I talk to inside Trump world and other folks who kind of follow these cases more broadly are like, what are these guys saying and to whom?
It's fascinating. Garrett, good stuff. Thank you, sir. Let me move over to Vaughn Hilliard, who is in Rapid City, South Dakota. Look, we've been talking about how the former president doesn't do a lot of campaign events these days. And this is unique in that he's also getting an endorsement. Are we seeing a preview of the Republican ticket if Donald Trump's the nominee tonight?
You know, one thing, Chuck, I think over our last 10 years of working and covering the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, and that you and I have engaged over, is the voters really tell us where this thing is heading. And to answer your question, you know, our great embed, Jake Traylor, and I were just asking some folks here waiting outside of his event here this evening in South Dakota who they wanted to be VP. And we came in with the assumption that they would want their governor, Kristi Noem, to be the VP pick. We expect her to endorse Donald Trump here later tonight. But interestingly, just one out of the first 10 people we talked to said Kristi Noem, and even had some criticisms. One guy questioned whether she would be a loyal servant to Donald Trump. 7 people, though, they brought up the name without any prompting, Kari Lake. This is a Republican Party that has changed over the last 10 years, Chuck. Kari Lake is somebody who lost the bid for governor in Arizona, is mulling whether to run for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, and yet despite the election denialism, despite her own loss in Arizona, named by 7 out of 10 people, the very first 10 we talked to, unprompted here, despite their own governor being a top frontrunner to be his VP.
That's interesting. Look, there's a couple of ways I could go here. I mean, she's had her own sort of political issues in the state. You wonder has that actually stuck to her, right? She had some issues with her daughter and this idea of an inside sort of helping out with, I think, a real estate license or something like that. That whole thing. Is it clear to you that that is what stuck to her a little bit?
There was one woman who told me that she promised to lower taxes here and that she did not fulfill her promise. She said that she is somebody who believes that she would be more outspoken. She is not Carrie Lake. She is not Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't think there's anybody that questions the conservative credentials over her 8 years in the U.S. House or here in South Dakota. At the same time, it's not just about conservative credentials. It's not about opening your state during COVID. It's not about even just taxation. It's so much more than that. And to what extent does somebody stand out there on the front lines for Donald Trump? She has not endorsed him yet. Tonight, she has the opportunity to do just that.
Very quickly, we know the former president's obsessed with Mount Rushmore. What role is the national park they're playing in this campaign stop today?
That's a good question. We anticipated heading down to Mount Rushmore, but instead the campaign has this event in downtown Rapid City. I went myself about 35 minutes down the road. The Trump campaign has not suggested that they are going to head that way. Of course, he made a stop there during his own presidency. And for anybody that has been to Mount Rushmore, there are plenty of stone to be carved into. And it's just a matter of who would give the approval for that and whether Donald Trump could be at the helm of the White House when that opportunity would potentially present itself, Chuck.
Vaughn Hilliard on the ground in Rapid City, South Dakota. Good time to actually be visiting. Better to visit South Dakota in September than in January, my friend.
It's pretty good right now.
All right, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Chuck.
I'm joined now. I want to get deeper into this Georgia business here because, and I got J. Tom Morgan with us. He's, of course, the former district attorney in DeKalb County, Georgia. And J. Tom, I want to start with, look, it's us in the media. I want to stipulate this. We filed the motion here to get this grand jury report released. The question I have for you is, should the judge have done this?
Chuck, first let me say, I, among many others, we're going to miss your insightful comments on Meet the Press.
Thank you for saying
but it should not have been released, Chuck. I have been a Georgia lawyer for more than 40 years. 25 years as a prosecutor. I had special grand juries under my watch as district attorney. I have never seen a report released accusing people of crimes where they were not indicted. And in fact, we have some Georgia law right on this point that a grand jury cannot accuse someone of a crime unless it is in an indictment. As you mentioned earlier, whether or not these persons are not guilty of a crime, we'll never know because they were not indicted. They don't have a chance to defend themselves in the court of law. I'm sure they're glad they're not indicted, but those who are indicted.
How is this not illegal?
Chuck, I think it is illegal. At least I think that those persons who are not indicted but their names were released should immediately file a motion to have their names redacted from that document.
You would expect somebody to do that? And sounds like you would recommend somebody do that.
I would, and I would do that as a former prosecutor, that the role of the prosecutor is to make sure justice is served. Right. And I don't believe justice is served when we accuse people of crimes in a document such as this where they cannot defend themselves.
All right. The toothpaste is out of the tube. Does this weaken or strengthen Fani Willis's case?
I think it puts her in an awkward situation. People are going to be questioning why these were not indicted. Were there some under-the-table deals made with these that were not indicted that we'll find out about later? Is there a selective prosecution? Why some and not the others? As you know, there's great prosecutorial discretion. Mm-hmm. Now, when you've got a case like this, where there may be similarly situated people with the same set of facts, and she chooses some and not the others, it's going to be a big question.
Choosing not to indict these folks, to me, on one hand, should at least potentially show she wasn't looking at this through a purely political prism. But then the judge releasing, I mean, do you think this undermines the judge's credibility?
I do believe Judge McBurney, I have a great respect for him, but he should have given notice to all the persons, we're not aware that he did, that their name is on this document and that they will have the opportunity to file a motion to have it redacted before it is released.
Bigger picture now. Where you've watched this week go. What do you expect? Do you expect any of these the indicted folks to successfully get their case moved to the federal courts?
Well, that is waited to be seen, Chuck. We're waiting for Judge Jones to release a decision, hopefully very soon, though he did tell Mark Meadows to be prepared to go to the arraignment in case his decision has not been released. That is a game changer. We never had anything like this. Do all the cases go up? What about the two, Powell and Chesbro, who have filed speedy trial demands? If I was fighting Willis right now, I would be preparing to try that case, since she's already told us there's going to be 150 witnesses.
Is there a possibility that her trying this first case against Chesbro, if he's the first one, is an asset to her more than it's a lie? I mean, I understand the downsides of showing your cards, but in some ways the evidence is stronger specifically against this single individual.
Well, as you know, Powell and Chesbro are going to be tried together, and they're very two different defendants. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to watch because, one, as you said, she will have a chance to put her witnesses up and see how they do under oath. If she gets a conviction on either one or both, she's going to have a strong hand with those others who are thinking about whether or not they should plead before they go to trial.
If some of this gets moved into federal court, if some of these folks are successful, and I'm not a lawyer, I feel like Mark Meadows has the strongest case to make. Whether he succeeds, we'll find out. Does that at all impact the timing of the trial itself for Chesbro or Powell?
Well, Chesbro and Powell will have to make a motion to join the others if the case gets moved to federal court. Right now, their attorneys have said that they want a trial, they're ready for trial, and that they want to be tried on October 23rd. Unless something extraordinary happens, we can bet those two will be on trial, Chuck, and that we will have a camera in the courtroom and watch how it goes.
Well, that to me is one of the wild cards there. It's a Trump-adjacent trial. That'll be televised in perhaps the start of the actual voting season. J. Tom Morgan, former DeKalb County District Attorney. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
Coming up, I'll give you a little tease of my exclusive interview with California's Democratic Governor, Gavin Newsom. What he told me about whether he's planning to run for president in 2024, plus what he has to say about the vice president and his relationship with RFK Jr. Plus, we're tracking Hurricane Lee after the powerful storm intensified from a Category 1 to a Category 5 in less than 24 hours. Man, hurry up and turn north and avoid all of us, please. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. There is no sugarcoating it for the White House or Democrats. President Biden's political standing is vulnerable. Hard stop, even inside his own party. According to a recent poll from CNN, nearly 7 in 10 Democrats say the party should nominate someone else in 2024, largely, it seems, over one issue, concerns about his age. For this Sunday's Meet the Press, I sat down with Governor Gavin Newsom of California. He's, of course, a rising national figure in his party. And he's got his own political ambitions. He's not shy about that. We've talked about the future of the Democratic Party, whether Democrats have a plan B if Biden decides during the holidays not to seek a second term. Here's a quick part of that conversation. Filing deadlines haven't passed. President Biden doesn't run. Why shouldn't we consider you a likely candidate?
Well, I think the vice president is naturally the one lined up, and the filing deadlines are quickly coming to pass. And I think we need to move past this notion that he's not going to run. President Biden is going to run, and looking forward to getting him reelected. I think there's been so much wallowing in the last few months and hand-wringing in this respect, but we're gearing up for the campaign. We're looking forward to it.
But you hear these calls privately. What do you tell these donors who are wallowing in this?
Time to move on. Let's go.
And am I supposed to interpret that comment about the vice president, that if for some reason the president chose not to run at this point,
well, that's the
everybody rallies around her?
It's the Biden-Harris administration. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned.
Yeah,
maybe I'm a little old-fashioned about presidents and vice presidents. I was a lieutenant governor, so I'm a little subjective.
It's your relationship with the vice president.
We knew each other before we were both in politics. The day I got sworn in as mayor, walked across the street. She got sworn in as district attorney. Extraordinarily close working relationship, including her time in the Senate.
So you can't imagine ever having to run against each other?
Of course not. By definition, it won't happen. But I've said that 1,000 times. We privately continue to maintain a very good relationship, interpersonal, just how you doing, checking in. It's been a challenging few years with COVID, And we've had the opportunity to sit down, have lunch together in the White House. We spend time talking about important things.
So nobody's
and trivial
upset. She's
things.
not upset that you're going to debate Ron DeSantis?
Maybe. Apparently someone in her office is, because I read some off-the-record quotes. I wish I knew who that was, but I don't hear it from her. And I'm certainly not hearing it from the White House itself.
That's just a small part of my conversation. I spoke to Governor Newsom about the challenge by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to Biden. And we're going to get to that in a moment because that ended up being very personal. And it surprised me, and it will surprise you in a few minutes. But joining me now on this panel is some longtime friends of this show. Susan Page, the Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today. Cornell Belcher, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst and Republican strategist. Brad Todd. No, we're not related, but for the last time I'll say it. But so what? We've been brothers in arms at times. Susan, let me start with that. Look, I did the interview. I have my own impressions. What are your impressions?
That is a man who is accepting the political reality that even if there's concern about Biden, they need Biden to run because of the mess that will ensue if Biden doesn't run. Because he's not the only guy in the Democratic Party who would be interested in getting the presidential nomination. And Kamala Harris is maybe kind of teed up for that, as he said, but that is not a done deal. The party can avoid that by Biden staying in the race. And by the way, there's no sign that he's not going to do that.
You know, Cornell, it was interesting to me, though, that I had somebody posit this to me, that, you know, sometimes your best time is not the most convenient time for the party, right? A lot of people told Barack Obama, no. Go become governor of Illinois, and we'll see you in 2012 or 2016, right? People told Bill Clinton not to run in 92.
That's right.
H.W. Bush is unbeatable. Well, Bill Bradley took that advice. Dick Gephardt took that advice. And, you know, they never got to the White House. I've had somebody make the case that Gavin Newsom, it's going to be too crowded for him in 28, that actually it might be this would be his best shot.
Well, it's not going to be his best shot against a sitting incumbent.
No, and that's the issue. It's the sitting incumbent.
And by the way, I mean, I understand our infatuation with this story, but President Biden is going to run for re-elect. You know, he's geared up to do it. All signs are is going to do it. And look, all this bemoaning from the left. Look, as someone who's lived their entire their life on the left, it's like herding cats, right? I heard the same conversation about Barack Obama before his re-elect. Oh, Barack Obama is weak. 2010, he's gonna lose us more. There were op-eds that said Barack Obama literally should not run for re-election, coming from the left. So I'm sort of used to this from the left, but he'll be fine.
You know, it's interesting. He really is embracing this idea that he and DeSantis are doing what his political hero, Bobby Kennedy Sr., I'm going to get to that in a minute, and Ronald Reagan did back in the day. They debated each other like this natural. That moment could change things.
For sure it could. You know, and Joe Biden's running as long as he's physically able to run, but he might not be physically able to run.
And I always say this, they're going to have another family conversation around the holidays. It's inevitable. Lots of families do that. So who knows?
And you can't also expect Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of the largest state, one of the brightest stars in his party, to look at polls like this week where we saw in CNN's poll that said most Democrats don't even think Joe Biden should run for re-election. So he can't not be watching that.
There is somebody obviously running against Joe Biden right now. It's Bobby Kennedy Jr. And I knew that he had some, and I was very curious what he thought of Bobby Kennedy Jr. in this race. And he was pretty candid about his relationship with him. Take a listen. Do you have a relationship with his son?
We have a very close one for decades.
And then?
Obviously, points of view that have diverged pretty significantly and consequential.
Did you try to encourage him not to run?
No, I would never do that. Look, I revere his family broadly. Got to know a lot of the family members. Bobby Jr. I'll be fully candid. He was really one of my great inspirations on the environment. Junior. Yeah. No one better on the stump. In fact, it comes back. He is the old stump. He uses it today.
I see it, right.
It's exactly what he was saying 20 years ago. And it's evocative. It's a spiritual frame. Beautiful, it's profound, it's consequential in terms of reaching out to the other side. So there's that aspects I hold on to. Then he loses me on many others, including some personal shots he took around vaccines and suggesting somehow that I got ill. There was a lot of very curious things where I knew the spectrum, that he was sort of veering off on the spectrum.
Much
and his sight was veering off. I think this
personally just bothers you.
It disappoints.
It's like losing a friend, right?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a reverential aspect to it. Of course, we disagree on Sirhan's release as well, and many different things. So look, I wish him only the best. I mean that. I have great respect for him and his kids and his wife. But boy, his politics has shifted, and I just don't buy it. When I'm seeing her, watching him on Tucker and watching him on all these Bannon and everything else.
He's being used?
He's smart enough not to be used, but he knows what he's doing, and he's being used. Both and.
Interesting.
Both and, of course. But I think the utility's wearing off a little bit. You can only show up on those same shows so many times, and I think he needs a second act if he's going to take on the president. And I have no worry about the president's success in this primary.
You know, Susan, I've been waiting to hear from the Kennedy acolytes about how this has to just personally, and that was the most candid I've heard from anybody talking about. There's pain in some Democratic circles over this.
You know, I'm going to be perfectly candid with you, Chuck.
That drives me crazy. I've had interviews do that all the time. You're like, how am I supposed to take that? There's always part of it. Can I stop the interview? Apparently, we haven't been doing the candid parts.
Obviously, the Kennedy family has a special position in American politics, especially for Democrats. But you know what's worse for Democrats than Biden's age? It's third-party candidates. It's challengers. It's no labels. It's Cornell West. That really has the potential to take a close race and tip it, and that is a dangerous thing.
What do you make of why the Bannon types are just been like they seem to be almost gaming the Kennedy thing, and he plays right into it.
Well, the Republican coalition has changed some. A lot of blue-collar folks who were Democrats and grew up in Democrat households their whole life were Kennedy Democrats, and now they're in the Republican coalition.
Yeah.
There's a little of that. There's a little of that. And I also think that, look, we came through COVID, and he was on the right side of skepticism of public health.
Even for weird reasons?
Right, for differing reasons. But I think that alone is enough. And a critic of Biden's is an ally to any Republican.
Interesting. What'd you make of that?
That was some of the nicest things that any Democrat has said about RFK.
It's not like a personal friend. Yeah, it feels like they've been betrayed.
It was very personal. And by the way, at some point when it's probably conducive, I've got a feeling that some of the Kennedys are going to come out and strongly and say something, but it's not going to be right now. Look, but Susan's absolutely right. This is 2016. This is how 2016 happens again, right? Yeah. We have back-to-back performance. We know what Donald Trump's ceiling is. We do. We've seen it in several performances. Right. This is how 2016 happens again, because if you look at those voters that are hanging out there for West and hanging out there for RFK Jr., they are a lot more in line with Biden than they are with Trump.
The big news today surprised all of us, including you. We have Nancy Pelosi's biographer with us, Susan Page, and you confessed you would not, if you were to ask, well, what's she doing today, you would have assumed announcing her retirement.
I heard she was going to make some news, and I called my office and said, I think Nancy Pelosi is retiring. We better get ginned up on our, appreciation of her career.
And what happened here?
She's sticking around.
Oh, well, you know her better than any of us at this table.
Obviously, she loves the House. She loves politics. She's a crucial part. She raises more money than anybody. She gives advice to Hakeem Jeffries and others but only when they ask for it. And I think she's not quite ready to go.
Does this just put with the Feinstein situation, Cornell, it just seemed, I'll be honest, I was shocked. I was in the middle of doing my affiliate promotions. I have a lot of California, because I have Newsom this week, a lot of California affiliates are all going, and I'm like, I just didn't think she would. I think it sends an awkward message.
I will say this. I don't think anyone, and there's been a lot of conversations about age with Minority Leader McConnell and Feinstein. I don't think anyone questions that Nancy Pelosi is as sharp as a whip. And by the way, we're very thankful that she was in fact leader during Trump times, because she stood up to him in ways that I don't think anyone on our Democratic bench, and I love our Democratic bench, could have stood up to Donald Trump.
Let me get on my hobby horse here, which is the whole point of a successful democracy is no one is irreplaceable. And I say this as somebody who's, look, it's always hardest to let go at the very end. All right? I'm not going to lie to you, okay? You're like, sit there, oh, no, I understand it, but if we ever operate in a situation where someone's not irreplaceable, that's no longer a democracy.
Well,
and whether it's McConnell or Pelosi here.
I think a lot of swing voters look at this, will look at Washington right now and say, how come there's so many people with an 8 in their age up there? Yeah. But as I will tell you, as a Republican ad maker who's linked a lot of Democrats to Nancy Pelosi, I'm very grateful that she's going to stick around.
You want to continue to use her?
Correct. As long as she's more relevant for the next 2 years, that's even better for Republicans.
And that's why I like our chances, by the way.
This wasn't an accident that I had three of you on here. There's a good, smart group of people in Washington. We've all sort of grown up together. Hotline, all those days. So it's the joy of my life for doing these panels.
Good sailing.
Thank you. All right.
Check.
Good sailing.
All right.
And thank you.
Appreciate it.
Fair winds.
Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you soon. Meanwhile, you can catch more of my exclusive interview with Governor Gavin Newsom this Sunday on your local NBC News station. Up next, New York City's mayor warns the influx of migrants will, quote, destroy New York City, escalating his criticism of fellow Democrats for not doing enough to help. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is once again criticizing fellow Democrats and calling on the Biden administration to do more to address an influx of migrants into his city, as New York City struggles to accommodate more than 110,000 people who have arrived there in need of food, housing, and education. Adams sharply escalated his public warning about the situation this week, while also placing blame on Texas Governor Greg Abbott for busing migrants from the border to New York.
We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month.
In addition to New York City's status as a sanctuary city, the city's current laws require its government to provide shelter to anyone who wants it. For more on this, I'm joined by Politico New York's Joe Anuda, who covers City Hall. Joe, I want to start. Let's go back in time here. This law, when did New York City pass this law, and what was the motivation at the time?
So at the time, there were some homeless individuals who were represented by a lawyer. This is during the Koch years, so we're talking late 70s.
Right.
They basically sued and said, hey, look, the New York State Constitution has this clause in it that says basically shelter is more or less a public right. And so they sued and they said, you know, according to the state constitution, the city has to provide shelter. And after years of litigation, Koch settled essentially and entered into a consent decree, which is kind of an interesting arrangement. It basically means the courts are very much involved in what's going on in New York, and sort of, you know, looking over to make sure these laws are being followed.
Obviously, the mayor's frustrated by this. One of the things he's brought up is that the migrants are sort of like, even those that want to work, they can't. Explain.
Yeah, so when you come here and seek asylum, first you have to fill out an asylum application, which we're learning not a lot of the folks who have arrived here are filling these out. It's been kind of a criticism from the Biden administration towards the city is they need to do better, because once you fill out your application, then there's essentially like a 150-day waiting period. And so basically it takes months. You have to sit around and you're sort of in these shelters and you can't get work. And I think, you know, the mayor's pointing out that the Biden administration could do more. They could grant more temporary protected status to some of the folks who are coming here. At the same time, these people are not being enrolled and they're not getting the legal services they need en masse to sort of get through all this paperwork. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and we're not really seeing the movement through that.
Look, there's a lot of city groups involved. Have you seen evidence of HHS or DHS?
Oh, yeah. Chuck, this is really subsuming city government in a way.
No, I understand city government, but I'm talking about the feds, those two big Fed agencies.
Oh, I think as far as on the ground, sort of in a practical way, no, this is really being handled by the city. So you're seeing a bunch of city agencies. They're opening the emergency shelters, these intake centers. They're coordinating education services. That's all being done on the local level. And I think one of the mayor's points is it's very expensive. They've predicted this could be a $12 billion problem by the summer of 2025.
Could they get the governor to ask to declare a state of emergency?
It's been on the table, but, you know, we really haven't seen an appetite from Governor Hochul to do that. I think from her perspective, they put $1 billion in the budget and they feel like They're helping financially. But really, there's been no appetite for a state of emergency whatsoever.
But if he did, the state of emergency is a way to get federal dollars in on a fast track, potentially, right?
Yeah, but I think, at this point, from my perspective, the federal money question is really landing on folks like Senator Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the House. They're the ones who've really been doing the negotiating behind the scenes. Yeah. They have been getting FEMA, when they've been doing these large grants to cities across the country, they've sort of been running point on trying to get as much resources for New York as possible. But it's really been a drop in the bucket. I mean, I think the city has earmarked less than $150 million, which sounds like a lot, but when you put that up against a $12 billion problem, not so much.
Joe Nuda, it's a complicated issue to cover, and it has been fascinating to watch. The mayor feels like he's the one on an island on this compared to where the rest of his party is. I am surprised it's going to stay that way for too long, though. We shall see. I appreciate it. Thank you. We're also following a potentially catastrophic development in the Atlantic Ocean. This Hurricane Lee right now is a Category 4 storm. It actually got downgraded earlier today, but it is on the cusp of strengthening back into a Category 5. You know how warm the waters are. But Lee's path remains uncertain, as does the timing of when it could make landfall, if at all. But meteorologists have been stunned at the speed at which it intensified this week. Let's bring in Bill Cairns to join me now. And Bill, last week we talked about what was happening in that little incubator near the Yucatan. This is the old-fashioned way we're used to hurricanes. And this, I mean, a Category 5 this far out of the Atlantic is unusual, right?
It is. I mean, the water temperatures are about 5 degrees warmer now than 20 years ago in the same location. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that you have to have 80 to get development of these storms, and anything over 80 is like you can get really strong storms, it makes a big difference. And that's one of the reasons why this thing just exploded. So let's show you what actually happened, because it doesn't, it's pretty rare. This will be in the history books. It's only happened a couple times in the past. Wilma was one of the ones that did something close to this. So 80 miles per hour. This was Wednesday evening. 80 mile per hour hurricane, Category 1. We get them all the time. And then in 24 hours, this thing just blew up. This beautiful looking eye. It has a stadium effect to it. When the aircraft recon are in there, it looks like it's inside a football stadium. It went up to 160 mile per hour winds in 24 hours. To be considered rapid intensification, it only had to go up 35 mile per hour winds. I mean, we doubled the intensity so fast. Now, it has weakened since then, wind shear, and it probably has already hit its maximum that it will ever hit in its lifetime. So 150 mile per hour winds. The eye got a little obscured here. So now it's going to be slowly weakening. I say slowly because even 5 days from now, the Hurricane Center still has this as a major hurricane. It avoids the Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Haiti, Dominican Republic. It avoids the Bahamas. That's all fantastic. But then it's going to take a turn to the north. And the question is, does it bend to the northeast and miss us all and we can say thank you, goodbye? Right. Or are we going to have to deal with this time next week? So our European model, all these little blue lines, Nova Scotia, you have to be ready just in case about a week from now. Maybe not so much in eastern New England. Maine possibility, got to keep an eye on it. Nothing is really sending this directly into the mid-Atlantic by any means. And our red lines are the American model. So we actually have some pretty excellent agreement here for once. And the thing that's going to determine what happens next week, there's a storm that will come through the Great Lakes. If that storm is stronger, it'll bounce Lee out off the coast and maybe miss everyone. If that storm trends a little weaker and this high pressure is stronger, that's when we may have to watch out Cape Cod getting brushed, possibly up here in the Maine or Nova Scotia. But at this point, it would likely be a Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane. Still big impacts for heavily forested areas, but it wouldn't be the beast it is now, Chuck. And Chuck, going back in all of our memories covering all these storms, I was thinking about how we went through 3 national Republican conventions, with all that got delayed because of Gustav, Laura, and Isaac. And your reaction to all those were like, come on, what are we doing?
You're right. By the way, I did notice that single spaghetti strand to New York City. It's almost like the Europeans are taunting us on that one. Let's just say,
best of luck, my friend.
It's football season. I'm rooting for that Low. Get stronger, Low. Let's get rid of Lee. Anyway, Bill, terrific, my friend. Thank you. Okay. I'll miss this.
My best.
All right. After the break, don't call it a comeback, but COVID-19 is making a resurgence. I'm going to talk to the infectious disease expert we trust around here about what to expect this flu season as the FDA prepares to greenlight a new COVID vaccine. Don't know if we're supposed to call it a booster now. As soon as today, you're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Labor Day has come and gone. The school year has begun and COVID numbers are rising once again as we head into the fall. COVID hospitalizations, which had been slowing since the beginning of the year, have started to climb a bit once again, but ICUs aren't overrun. COVID-related deaths, while thankfully remaining low overall, have also ticked up. The virus even touched the White House again this week when the First Lady tested positive. We should note that while this data provides a trend for the virus, it still paints an incomplete picture. The U.S. is no longer in public health emergency. States aren't required to report routine COVID data, and updated hospitals protocols means that only patients who are symptomatic are even tested for COVID. And as COVID rates climb again, the FDA has come under fire from doctors who say the government is not moving fast enough to get some new booster shots out to the public. We're watching for FDA approval for a new COVID shot, perhaps as early as the next 13 minutes before 5 p.m. Let's bring in Michael Osterholm. I told you, he's the epidemiologist and director of the University of Minnesota's Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. He's joining me now to preview what we can expect, but more importantly, and he was my partner for those 2 long years of pandemic. You know, we were both at our own homes, but constantly, and I thought, if I'm doing this one more time, I want to get the best back here one more time. Michael, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
So let's talk about this. I want to start with the COVID. First of all, is this a booster shot or a separate and new vaccine?
Well, it is a booster shot in the sense that it's basic still SARS-CoV-2. It's just a different variant type. And the good news is, Chuck, that right now the data from the last 24 to 36 hours that has been released supports that, in fact, it will cover the variants we're seeing right now. So that this is something that we all should want to get when it becomes available.
What, I say this as a patient and as, you know, watching my mom run around for the different shots here. Are we at a point where we could put the flu shot and the COVID shot and maybe RSV into one shot, or is that a bit beyond our technological capabilities right now?
Well, I think it's very important to emphasize that despite the fact that some, like the FDA, want to make this a seasonal infection, meaning like influenza, when you can count on it to occur between, say, November and January, we haven't seen that yet with this virus. The only thing I see about this virus that makes it seasonal is it occurs in all 4 seasons. And I think that one of the things that's really important to emphasize here is what we're seeing right now is major activity. We have states out there where over a quarter of all the nursing homes are in the middle of large COVID outbreaks. We're seeing large school outbreaks. What's different, however, is that this virus, and with the immunity that we do have, isn't causing a big increase in severe illness. You mentioned that already. I mean, when you think about hospitalizations, we're at 17,000 right now in the last week, but we were at 160,000 a week back in January of 2022. If you look at deaths, today we're talking about 700 deaths this week, but we were talking about 26,000 deaths back in January of 2021. Yeah. So it's a different situation in terms of seriousness, but it still is widespread.
Look, you got on my radar over a decade ago, you know, when you first sort of like what keeps you up at night type of thing, and you know, you really sort of tried to sound the alarm about our inability to be prepared for something like this. Well, we just went through it. You think this country can handle another pandemic in the next 10 years?
I do not. And when I say I don't think they can, we will, of course, obviously survive. Sure. But at the same time, I think the trust that we have right now in our institutions, our governments, clearly is at an all-time low when it comes to public health. Vaccines the same way. And so I think the next pandemic, and there will be another one, there will be potentially ones that are much larger than this one. Mm-hmm. And I worry that we're not ready for that. And we have not had yet as a government a really systematic review of what went right, what went wrong, and how can we improve on that.
I was just going to say, because when I could think of people that I want to see on that committee, you would be at the top of the list. Do you want to see President Biden and Congress essentially greenlight a 9/11 type style commission? You know, we need to do this after action report. I think it's pretty clear. I don't know whether the public would accept it, but would you like to see this ordered up?
Absolutely. You know, I think at this point, we need to learn from what happened to prepare for the future. This is not a situation where we might have a pandemic again someday. We will have one. And there are many, many lessons to be learned. And if there's anything that we need to do to address this is take great humility and acknowledge what did we really do well, what did we not do well, and how do we change that? And so I think that this is a very important issue, and I very much support such an activity.
Well, I mean, let's look. We got a minute left here. What's the one thing we did really well, and what's the one thing right now that you would say, boy, we were terrible at, and that's what we got to improve first?
I think the most important thing we did was get vaccine out in a time that most people thought would never allow us to get a vaccine out. And clearly, at least 3 million lives were saved in this country alone from having the vaccine. Now, the challenge is, of course, as you know, is many people won't take it. And these boosters, right now, most of the deaths we're seeing are in people 65 years of age and older, yet only 42% of that population got the previous booster. So we need to continue to work on that, but that's the good thing. I would say the bad thing is that communication. And this is a joint issue. This is not just public health. This is government. This is the media. Some of the very best stories that ever appeared regarding the pandemic appeared in the New York Times. Some of the very worst stories that ever appeared regarding the pandemic occurred in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we have an obligation to go back and understand how can we communicate better.
I want to close with the CDC. I fear that they're in retreat mode. What's your level of concern? Does CDC have the resources to do the job we are asking them to do right now?
They do not, but I don't think any agency in the world does. And I think that's why this after action report is so important. Mm-hmm. What is it going to take for us to basically be better prepared?
Right.
And, I think that we just don't have it.
Michael Osterholm, like I said, it's been a pleasure to get to know you through these years. You made us smarter.
Thank you. On behalf of so many viewers out here, thank you. You have been a gift to getting information out. Thank you.
Well, and it's because of people like yourself. So appreciate it. We'll be right back with a look at where we've been and where we're going.
Chuck, I'm not by myself because this is a carpool. So John Hickenlooper's back there.
Yeah.
There he is.
So we have a caucus. All right. We have a caucus of two. Hello, Senator Hickenlooper. From weekly to daily, welcome to our first show on a busy day in national, international politics. Live from Boulder, Colorado. Here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We are here in the debate spin room. Coming to you live from the University of Nevada. In New York City, our election headquarters. Here in Cleveland. In historic Philadelphia. In Mobile, Alabama. In Des Moines, Iowa. In Phoenix, Arizona. And beautiful Maricopa County, Arizona. Here in Dallas, Texas. Florida. Live from Las Vegas, Nevada. From Battleground, Georgia, here in Atlanta. I'm coming to you live from PNC Park, home of the Pittsburgh Pirates. If it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if it's Friday, it's Meet the Press. Well, follow the hairline on that one. When we first came up with the idea of the daily version of Meet the Press, we made it our goal to take the top-notch political news and analysis that has been the hallmark of Meet the Press since the beginning of the television era. And we wanted to bring it to an audience every day. Over 8 years, more than 2,000 shows. I'm proud to say that we've done that. And I'm equally proud to say I may be living, but this show continues. So it's kind of nice to build something and see someone else take it over. So this is my last show as the anchor of Meet the Press now. But this show and the Sunday show is going to continue to build on the legacy of Meet the Press that has stood for more than 75 years. As I always like to say, I just didn't want to be the last moderator of the longest running television show in American history. World history. And I've succeeded at that. Our politics have changed a lot since our first day on the air as Meet the Press Daily, and they'll continue to change. That's the nature of politics. And Meet the Press in all its forms. It's going to be here to break it down every day, every week, to help you know what matters and why, to ask tough questions to our nation's leaders, to explain Washington to America and America to Washington. That's what we've always done and what we'll continue to do. As for me, I also plan to continue that mission as well. My first day on the job at Meet the Press, I was handed an audience survey of Sunday show viewers. And the number one reason why folks decided to tune into any Sunday show, the number one reason, to get educated. It wasn't to find out if their side was winning or losing. They just wanted to know. It's that education piece that I'm hanging my hat on for the rest of my professional life. Because one thing we all lament lately is the lack of knowledge and nuance in our politics. That's a vacuum I hope to continue to fill, whether in a traditional news platform or via other venues, documentaries, docudramas, or even too close to the truth fiction. I couldn't have done this show and the Sunday show for nearly a decade without an incredible team of people behind the camera, producers, editors, directors, camera operators, the tech folks of every stripe. There are too many people to name. Television is the ultimate team sport, and I've been a proud member of this team, and I'm going to continue to be a member of it, just in a different position. So I'll be back for Sunday one more time on Meet the Press. Then I'll hand the baton to my friend Kristen Welker. You're going to see her here, too, as anchor of Meet the Press Now, because it helps. It helps you do the Sunday show. It's a better Sunday show to do this daily show. And you'll see some other top-notch NBC political talent in this chair as well. I'll continue to be a big part of NBC political coverage because no one in this business covers politics as well as NBC. Thanks for watching. I'll see you down the road, and I'll see you Sunday on your local NBC News station. I have exclusive interviews with two people I intentionally wanted to book for the last show because they accept the premise, and they'll answer tough questions even if they don't like it. Governor Gavin Newsom and Senator Bill Cassidy. Don't miss it. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson. In a few seconds, I'm going to give her I'm going to take up a little time of hers because I usually take up too much time of hers. But then I'm going to hand the show to her, and then I'm going to see you on her show in a few minutes. But thank you for tuning in to me and giving me a chance to be in your living rooms. I'll see you down the road.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.